You ever think back to your old language classes? Maybe you were stuck memorizing endless verb charts or sitting in a language lab repeating phrases over and over. Whatever your experience was, did you ever stop and wonder, why? Why did your teacher do it that specific way? Well, it turns out it's not random at all. There's actually a secret blueprint, a kind of hidden philosophy behind every single teacher's style. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see what it is.
So here's our roadmap. First, we're going to decode that fundamental blueprint that all teaching is built on. Then, we'll take a trip through history, starting with the first huge shift away from old-school grammar rules. After that, we'll see how the spotlight moved onto the learner's feelings, then to the super practical goal of communication. And finally, we'll get to where we are today, this idea of moving beyond any single best method.
All right, let's jump right in with that blueprint. We're going to unpack the core concepts, the real DNA of any teaching style out there.
Okay, so you've probably heard these words floating around, right? Approach, method, technique. They kind of sound the same, but trust me, understanding the difference between them is the key to unlocking everything else. So what's the real deal?
So here's the framework, first laid out by a guy named Edward Anthony way back in 1963. The easiest way to think about it is like a pyramid. At the very top, you have the approach. This is the big why. It's the philosophy, the core belief about what language even is and how we learn it. Right below that, you've got the method. That's the how. This is the game plan, the system for actually putting that philosophy into practice. And then at the very bottom, the base of the pyramid, is the technique, the what. These are the specific things you literally do in the classroom, like a role-play activity or a grammar worksheet.
Let's just zoom in on the top of that pyramid for a second. The approach. This is the most abstract level. It's not a procedure, it's a belief system. For instance, if a teacher has a communicative approach, they believe the entire point of language is to connect with people and make meaning. That one single belief, that why, is going to shape every single decision they make in the classroom. It all starts there.
Okay, now that we have the blueprint, let's see how it actually played out over the years. We're going to start with the first major battle of ideas, a massive shift from seeing language as this dusty academic puzzle to seeing it as a living, breathing tool for actual conversation.
For a really, really long time, this was pretty much the only way, the grammar translation method. It came from the way people taught classical Latin and Greek. And think about it, the goal wasn't to go and order a coffee in ancient Rome, right? The goal was to train your mind and read classic literature. Language was basically a mental workout. It was all about dissecting grammar, memorizing huge lists of words, and translating texts with absolute perfection. Actually speaking it, yeah, that wasn't really on the menu.
And this is where we see the first great rebellion in language teaching. On one side, you've got the old guard, grammar translation, where the teacher is the absolute authority. But then, in the late 1800s, the direct method shows up and completely flips the script. All of a sudden, the goal is speaking fluently. The teacher isn't a lecturer anymore, they're a facilitator. And this was radical. Your native language was totally banned from the classroom. You learn the new language by using the new language. Period.
Then, the pendulum swung again. In the middle of the 20th century, influenced by behaviorist psychology, we got the audiolingual method, or ALM. This viewed language learning as basically building a set of habits. The idea was that if you just repeated things enough, stimulus, response, reward, you could make the correct grammar and pronunciation totally automatic. This is the golden age of the language lab, of listen and repeat, and making a mistake, oh, that was a bad habit that had to be stamped out immediately.
So just to quickly trace our path, we started in the 1800s with grammar translation, we swung over to the direct method, then we landed on the audiolingual method in the 40s. But then, in the 1970s, a whole new revolution started brewing, and this one was less about grammar drills and much more about feelings.
This next phase, wow, it was a true revolution. After all those mechanical, robotic drills of the audiolingual method, a new wave of thinkers came along and said, hey, we've forgotten the most important person in the room, the learner. This was the start of the humanistic movement.
And this quote from Caleb Gedikno, who is a huge figure in this movement, just says it all. Teaching should be subordinated to learning. The focus completely shifted. It wasn't about what the teacher was doing anymore. It was about what the learner was feeling and experiencing. The main goal became creating a safe, low-anxiety space where students could really thrive.
And this one idea just exploded into this incredible variety of methods. You had the silent way, where the teacher was, you guessed it, almost totally silent, just using colored rods and charts to get students to figure out the language on their own. There was community language learning, which was almost like group therapy to build trust. Suggestopedia used classical music and comfy chairs to get learners into a relaxed state. And Total Physical Response had students responding to commands like stand up, a bit like how kids learn their first language. All these very different methods shared one common goal: to lower anxiety and empower the learner.
So, after that deep dive into humanistic approaches, the next big evolution was a really practical one. The question wasn't just how do you feel anymore, it became what can you actually do with the language? This is the era where communication was crowned king.
And the real game-changing concept here was something called communicative competence. The idea, which came from a sociolinguist named Del Hymes, is that knowing a language is way more than just knowing perfect grammar. It's about knowing how to use that language to actually get things done in the real world. You know, how to apologize correctly, how to persuade someone, or how to complain effectively. It's not just what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. And when you put the communicative approach side by side with the old methods, you can see just how massive this shift really was. The main goal was now fluency and competence, not just perfect accuracy. The teacher went from being a drill sergeant to a partner in communication. And the classroom activities changed from translation and drills to things like role plays and problem-solving tasks, using real, authentic language. It was a whole new world.
So what's the next logical step from here? Well, it's something called task-based language teaching. With this, the entire lesson is structured around completing a real, meaningful task. So you don't study a bunch of grammar rules and then try to use them. No, you learn the language because you need it to accomplish a goal, like planning a trip with your group or trying to solve a puzzle together. The task itself is what drives the learning forward.
So, after this century-long search for the one, single, best way to teach, we finally arrive in the modern era. And this is where the thinking completely changes again. We're getting off the train that's looking for a perfect method.
We enter what one theorist, B. Kumavadevulu, calls the post-method era, and it's built on three really important pillars. First is particularity, the idea that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all method because every classroom, every culture, every group of students is totally unique. Second is practicality. Teachers aren't just robots applying someone else's method. They're professionals who build their own theories based on what actually works in their classroom. And third is possibility, the belief that teaching should be about empowering both the learners and the teachers themselves.
And this quote right here, it sums up the entire post-method philosophy perfectly. Methods may guide, but context decides. What this means is that a modern teacher isn't just blindly following a script from a textbook. They're an informed expert who understands the principles behind all of these methods we've talked about and makes intelligent, thoughtful choices based on their specific students in their specific classroom.
Which brings us right up to today. A great teacher in the 21st century is what you might call a principled eclectic. They draw from this entire rich history. They skillfully blend technology, they use real-world materials, they understand what motivates their students, and maybe most importantly, they are constantly thinking about their own teaching, always adapting, always evolving to meet the real needs of their learners.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. After this whole journey through all these dueling philosophies and teaching revolutions, what really is the secret blueprint of a great teacher? Is it finding and sticking to that one perfect, scientifically proven method? Or is it having the wisdom to understand your students, to read the room, and to choose, blend, and create exactly the right approach for the right person at the right time?